Hello everyone, and welcome once again to the Temple Institute Parsha class. My name is Gedalia Meyer, and I'm podcasting from Ma'ale Adumim in Israel. In almost any serious discussion about human life in general, questions come up concerning the notion of fairness. Pretty much everyone has some sense of this elusive quality, and pretty much everyone has some idea of their own standards to achieve it. The problem, of course, is that those standards differ from one nation to another, from one group to another, and from individual to individual. There may be some fairly universal bar for fairness, though it would be very hard to pin it down with any great detail. A good place to start might be the so-called golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. This is about as agreed upon a standard as possible, though even here there is going to be disagreement. First off, it is inherently limited to one's own bar of how they wish others to deal with them. Second, there is something about this universal rule that is fundamentally selfish. Third is the problem with all such universal rules. It breaks down when it gets into the details. Each person can use it to rationalize almost any behavior towards others based on the specific situation at hand. The biggest problem, however, is that there are going to be an almost infinite variety of cases in which one simply cannot follow the golden rule. Things just have to be done in life, either on an individual or a collective level, that inevitably require defying this rule. Societies have to have governments and systems of law and all kinds of other things that demand unfairness to some in the name of the general welfare. This is a fact of life, and it isn't going to go away anytime soon. We live in an imperfect world, and we have to learn to deal with it, even if it means breaking the golden rule on a regular basis. Judaism, even though it is the ultimate source for the golden rule, also had to make such compromises. Within its system of law and within Jewish society, there is no absolute protection for fairness. There are serious attempts at achieving it to whatever degree possible, but the elusive goal, for better or worse, is still elusive. Compromises have to be made all along the way, and each individual is ultimately left with the task of finding some path to satisfy their own definition of fairness. This week's Parsha is called Shoftim, which means judges. To some extent, the Parsha weaves around this general theme, but with several other subjects that really don't deal with judges at all. A more accurate assertion would be that it deals with fairness, or the biblical attempt to achieve it. Before going into some of the details, the warning must be given that the biblical notion of fairness is not necessarily identical with contemporary notions, whatever they may be. Things were radically different thousands of years ago, and it is simply a misconception that we can impose our standards on the distant past. Right off the bat, we have the famous line, "Justice, justice you shall pursue, in order that you inherit the land that Hashem your God is giving you." It then gets into a kind of supreme court made of priests, which was to be the ultimate decider of all matters of justice. Next, there's a section about appointing a king and whatever should be expected of a monarch. There is a section about prophets and the risk of charlatans assuming this important role. There is a law on how to find justice in the case of an accidental murderer. This, of course, is a situation which is impossible to be fair to all involved. So a system of refuge cities was set up to which the killer could flee to escape the vigilante justice of those who wanted to avenge the blood of the victim. It may not have been our solution to this problem, but it is a solution. There are laws about boundaries, about witnesses, about how to deal with the inevitable cases of false testimony. There are matters of conducting war with issues of captives, spoils, and conducting sieges. It all ends with what is probably the strangest law in the Parsha, the solution to an unsolvable killing. When a corpse is found which appears to have been the victim of murder, and there is simply no way to determine who was the killer, the biblical solution is to break the neck of a calf at the site of a nearby stream to absolve all those involved of any blame. Though this may seem to us to be a primitive or even barbaric solution to an unsolvable problem, it's not like we have come up with anything better over the thousands of years since. In the middle of all this is another case that gets right into the very core of fairness. It is one of the laws dealing with conducting a war, specifically with who is required to go to war. There are 4 exemptions to the draft listed here. The first 3 involving people who have embarked on a new stage in life but haven't had the time to really enjoy it. And the last with those who are simply afraid of the battle. This last exemption is just common sense. No army would want the faint-hearted in their battle lines. They will be the first to ditch everyone else when the going gets tough and will only inspire others to flee. But those first 3 exemptions need to be understood. Quote, "The officers will speak to the people saying, 'Is there any man who has built a new house and has not begun to live in it? Let him return home, lest he die in the war and another man live in it. And is there any man who has planted a vineyard and has not redeemed its first crop? Let him return home, lest he die in the war and another man redeem his crop. And is there any man who has betrothed a woman and has not married her? Let him return home, lest he die in the war and another man marry her.' And the officers continued to speak to the people, saying, 'Is there any man who is afraid and faint-hearted? Let him return home and not lessen the courage of his brothers like his own.'" It is a bit unclear what the relationship is between the first 3 exemptions and the last one. The 4th is clearly exempted because of its potential for demoralizing others in the army. It could be that this is the underlying reason for the first 3 exemptions. Perhaps out of fear that they will die in the war and somebody else enjoy the fruits of their hard-earned labors, they will also want to run away. There's nothing precluding this possible explanation, but then again, there's nothing really supporting it. There is no indication that the men in these 3 situations are going to ditch the war because of their predicament. Perhaps a more likely explanation is that there is an inherent lack of fairness in the situations at hand. It would simply not be right if people in these situations did not enjoy the benefits of what they had started, and those benefits fell into the hands of others. This was such an affront to the biblical standard of fairness that these exemptions were deemed essential. Why these specific examples of a wife, a house, or a vineyard were chosen was also likely a matter of biblical standards. These were the most essential facets of life in those days: a marriage, a home, and a dependable source of income or food. The fact is, it is not so different today. These 3 things are still at or near the top of many people's bucket lists of essentials. But there's a question that might be asked on all of this. What about everybody else who didn't have one of those 3 exemptions, but had some other pretty good reason for not wanting to die in the war? For that matter, it was a pretty good bet that nobody really wanted to die in a war and may have preferred scoring one of these exemptions and letting others suffer that fate. If a person has already married his wife, or has already lived in his house, or already enjoyed some of the fruits of his vineyard, but looked forward to many more years of continuing to enjoy those things, why should they be deprived of the chance to do so? There are no great answers to these questions. The best approach may have been to avoid war altogether so that nobody should have to risk their life and everything they have. But this, for one reason or another, was not really an option then. Wars were considered mandatory conditions of life in the ancient world, and there is no indication that they are going the way of the typewriter even today. Somebody had to fight in the wars. And if a nation did not have a standing army that was always ready to go to war, the army had to be made of its citizens, who had wives and homes and vineyards. So everybody was eligible for the draft, but some people had to be given breaks. This brings to mind the situation in the popular movie Saving Private Ryan. The story there is of a soldier in World War II whose 3 brothers had already died in the war, and Private Ryan was the lone surviving son. A special unit was sent to bring him out of the war to safety. It was obvious to all that this was necessary. Not so surprisingly, Private Ryan himself, when finally located in the middle of a village under attack, doesn't want to abandon his fellow soldiers. The unit that was sent to find him underwent great danger and suffered many casualties, including the death of its commander. The underlying theme of the story is to wonder why this man should be given this exemption from war, especially if it meant risking the lives of those sent to bring him back. There are no great answers to this question, but it is clear that this was what must be done. Sometimes our notions of fairness seem rather arbitrary. Sometimes they are obvious to all, but still raise questions. Sometimes they are clear as day. Usually the situation is such that what is fair to some is not necessarily fair to others. We may be forced to just go with hunches and intuitive feelings about what is fair and what isn't. Invariably, these situations result in some being satisfied that justice was done and others believing that it was anything but. It is part of the burden of being a human being to have to choose between easing the agony of one person at the expense of another. Is this fair or is it cruel? Perhaps it is neither one, but it still has to be done. There are no one-size-fits-all answers to the questions of fairness, but that doesn't exempt us from pursuing justice as one of the primary goals in our lives. If that means having to make tough choices that give breaks to some at the expense of others, well, that's just one more obstacle to a perfect life. As in biblical times, those choices have to be made today. The path to fairness and justice is not easy to find, but there are no exemptions to seeking it. Shabbat Shalom.